Dagor Dagorath, The Last Tale of Arda. 2. Of the Long Peace and the Waning of Memory. Men born into peace rarely grasp the weight of its keeping. The Valar at rest. In those days, the Valar yet dwelt in Aman, and the world lay under a peace long untroubled. After the passing of Middle-earth's third age and the overthrow of its dark lord, the years moved on without great upheaval, and Middle-earth seemed healed of its deepest wounds. Thus the powers of the West perceived that the dominion of the second-born had truly begun. They set aside the labour of shaping and all interference, and allowed men to arise beyond their presence. For they judged that what remained of the world must now be ordered by mortal will, and that the healing of Arda would grow from the freedom granted to men, fulfilling what they understood as the design of the One. Over long years, the eyes of the Valar grew more distant from the daily governance of Arda. Their might endured undiminished, and their splendour was unchanged. They chose to loosen their immediate hold upon any shaping of events, and as authority passed silently into the hands of mortal stewards, the elder kindreds would remain as witnesses and reminders of former ages. The elves endured as memory made flesh, and the dwarves as keepers of ancient craft, but governance of Middle-earth and the burdens of choice passed to men. The Valar themselves remained majestic and august in their being, clothed in light and in power beyond mortal understanding. Their care became a far distant guardianship, watching from afar as kings would allow heirs to take up the labour of rule. The door of night was kept, as it had long been kept. Elendil in Vingalot maintained his vigil, a brightness in the sky, yet beyond his threshold no sign had stirred for years uncounted. The Valar deemed the ancient shadow spent, its malice broken beyond recall, and they gave no further thought to the fate of him whom they had forced beyond the walls of the world. To them, the matter was ended, and their thoughts turned elsewhere. In Valinor, the elves dwelt in untroubled bliss, beneath skies free of any storm. They sang, and the light of the two trees lived in memory and song. The Valar would walk openly among them, in the fields of Yavanna and in the courts of Varda, all rejoicing that sorrow had been set aside. Nienna also walked there, veiled in grey, and many came to her still, for though grief had lessened in Aman, it was still present, and from her they learned pity and endurance, remembering the long sorrows of Arda that must yet be healed. Aule the smith laboured still in his forges, in craft and contemplation, delighting in the making of things subtle and fair, and the Noldor learned at his side, renewing arts half forgotten since the days of their awakening. Orome too rode at times beneath the green slopes of Valinor, the sound of his horn echoing faintly across the hills. He kept watch, and the hounds of Valinor were not wholly idle. Yet this peace had long been in the making, for ages had passed since the breaking of the world, and many who had fallen in the wars of Beleriand and beyond had returned from the halls of Mandos. Heroes of legendary days walked again beneath the light of Aman, lords and captains of the Noldor, and many whose names were once spoken only in lament. Their griefs were healed in part, and their wisdom deepened by time and memory. Yet one among the very greatest still dwelt apart. Curefinwe, the one remembered in the old tales as Fëanor, mightiest of the Noldor, remained within the halls, and none may speak of the hour of his release. Thus even in bliss there lingered the memory of judgment, and of deeds not yet reconciled. Long had it been since Manwe, the elder king, had last sought counsel to Eru beyond the world, and in his silence, Manwe perceived neither rebuke nor command. Often he would stand upon Taniquetil and would gaze at the bent seas and the airs of the world. He became content, trusting in the silence of Iluvatar. The doomsman, Namo, spoke little in those days, and Ulmo alone remained restless. For the Lord of the Waters keeps the thought of Middle-earth in his mind, and his care never departed from the shores and streams of the Hitherlands. In the deeps of his heart, uneasy tides stirred, though they took no form in word nor warning. The realms of the free peoples. So it was that long years continued to pass, and the world turned on. The years of men slipped into generations no longer counted by the Valar. Of all the children of Iluvatar, it was men who multiplied most greatly, spreading into lands once empty and raising new kingdoms where wilderness had stood. Their strength increased in number, craft, and daring, so that their cities grew vast and their works bold beyond the imagining of earlier ages. As their realms rose and flourished, and with some in time waning, the memory of the great War of the Ring receded, as a distant peak glimpsed through leagues of mist. Through lore preserved in the courts of kings, and through the songs of elves who yet lingered in Middle-earth, the men of the West knew the name of Aragorn Elessar, and the meaning of the days when the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor were reunited beneath his crown. They honoured that age as a golden age of men, yet it stood to them as the reign of Elendil the Tall had once stood to the ruling stewards of Gondor, revered and far removed. Few elves now remained east of the Great Sea. Of the Noldor, almost none endured in Middle-earth, save those who lingered out of duty to memory rather than delight in the mortal lands of Middle-earth. Their ancient cities lay broken and overgrown, white stones half lost beneath root and moss, and their towers were home only to birds and silence. Still, elves had not wholly departed. In hidden vales and forest havens they dwelt, watchful and sorrowful, at times speaking with men, though their counsels were offered sparingly and sought for less so. Indeed, many among the younger generations of men had never beheld one of the firstborn, and some whispered that such folk belonged only to the tales of their grandsires. This was folly. The elves still walked the woods and coasts, vigilant. Old rumours named Celeborn as the last of the great lords, but this was not so, for others of high lineage endured in secrecy, guarding their people and preparing for the hour of their final departure. Between west and east, a long, uneasy peace endured. No great war had arisen since the overthrow of the Dark Lord of Middle-earth's Third Age, and no alliance had arisen. Skirmishes flared among ever-shifting borders, old hatreds smouldered, and raids were answered in kind from both sides with ever-increasing brutality. Treaties were unmade as swiftly as they were made, and embassies passed beneath wary eyes. Thus the men of the West learned watchfulness, though many convinced themselves that the days of earth-shaking peril had passed beyond recall. Of the dwarves, few were openly seen. Their numbers greatly diminished, and their days grew inward. Khazad-dûm had been reclaimed and cleansed of shadow and flame, and Durin the Seventh sat upon the ancient throne, though none could say how many years had passed since the days of Durin the Sixth, for the reckoning of dwarves runs deep, and is a puzzle of secrets. Dwarves remained steadfast in friendship with the kingdoms of men, trading and lending labour and counsel, always withdrawing back into the stone. Yet their true numbers were never known, for they kept their counts close. Though fewer in sight, their strength endured, their hatred of orcs was undimmed, and often they joined men in hunting any remnant of them in deep vales and forgotten tunnels. In these latter days, their craft reached new heights, axes of star-tempered steel that bit through mail as through cloth, engines that broke stone with thunder, secret fires and black powders that split rock like lightning, and cunning devices for siege and defence. Thus, though secretive, their hand was still heavy in the shaping of this time in Middle-earth. The greatest kingdoms of men endured in strength and pride. The line of Elendil had never failed. Gondor and Rohan alike expanded their bounds, raising new towers upon the marches, carving roads through forest and hill, building settlements of great size where once only watchfires had stood. Quarries were opened, rivers bridged, and storehouses filled, working fields spread across the plains, and the sound of the hammer and the anvil rang day and night. The works of men grew bold and numerous, and their dominion over the land increased beyond that of any age since the days of Numenor. the hearts of men remained as changeful as winds upon the plains of Rohan. Prosperity bred restlessness no less than want, and among the mighty there arose a hunger for honour beyond merit, and power beyond right. So it was that in hidden places voices were hearkened to, born of envy and fear, for the longing of a power that once promised mastery to the proud. Factions were formed in secret, councils would convene in shadowed halls, and brotherhoods arose that bent the knee to no king of men. They would speak of rumours from the east, where old rites were renewed among tribes that never forsook the memory of darkness and shadow. They would name powers openly that had long fallen into legend, and play at treason without understanding the weight of the names they uttered. Few among them grasped their peril, and fewer still the folly of desiring dominion beyond mortal measure. The signs unspoken. But the king of the reunited realm was not deceived. Arvalon Erendur, descended from many kings and from a house half-elven in the depths of time, was keen of sight and resolute of heart. Tall among men, dark-haired and grey-eyed, he bore the gravity of long stewardship. The blade, known as Anduril, passed from father to son through generations, was still carried as a token of his house, and of the great oaths laid upon it, not drawn lightly in days of peace. Around his throne there gathered the kings of lesser kingdoms, lords and councillors from distant lands. In the high seat he bore the sceptre of Annúminas, and upon great days the crown of Gondor, all signs of the authority entrusted to him over north, south, and west. Often he rode in secret through his lands, attended by few, listening more than he spoke. In lands far from the courts he heard whispers of strange teachers coming from the east, bearing words of power and promises of mastery over fate. Such men spoke softly of order, of strength unburdened by law, and of ancient truths forgotten by kings. Few dared speak openly of such matters, yet the king perceived the pattern beneath them, and his unease deepened. In Arvalon, the twilight grace of Númenor endured. Stern in judgment, gentle in counsel, he could perceive the disquiet of his people, and discerned a storm long gathering. Yet he moved with restraint, knowing that to strike too soon is to scatter what might be uprooted. He long sought the source of corruption, desiring its utter end over its passing restraint. In the north, the long peace had worked its change. Arnor, once broken and renewed, endured as a realm of watchful strength over ancient glory. Its cities were fewer than in the days of its founding. Its people, though far greater in number, were still scattered across wide lands. As the roads were kept, the bounds of the realm were guarded with diligence. Tall men known as rangers still walked the wilds as wardens of memory, preserving the paths and places whose names had faded from the speech of common men. The north remained whole through that vigilance, born of remembrance, sustained beyond the strength of arms alone. In the south, Gondor prospered. Minas Tirith stood fair, her walls unmarred by any siege for many generations. The Pelennor bloomed with tilled fields and gardens. Even in prosperity, the king perceived a subtle weakening, a failing of resolve. Men born into peace rarely grasped the weight of its keeping, viewing ancient defences as relics rather than a necessity. Arvalon long laboured to renew the understanding of the lore of Gondor, setting lore masters among its people, restoring old observances, a memory that may yet serve as a shield. Over many years, dreams returned to him. They appeared as lingering visions stretching through the watches of the night, heavy and unrelenting, pressing upon the borders of thought with weary persistence. In them, he beheld signs repeated, a shadow rising slowly, a cold light in the west, a dread older than any kingdom of men. He spoke of these dreams to few and pondered them in silence, fearing he would hasten doom by naming it before its hour. The friendship of Rohan he held dear, and there the line of the mark endured in wisdom and valour. In those days, Eadric Helmsson ruled, stern in defence and slow to wrath, mindful of the long wars of his people and ever watchful of the east. In quiet council, the two kings spoke of unrest and murmuring cults, and they renewed the ancient bonds sworn by Earl and Cirion. It is told that once, in the early spring of that year, King Eardric Helmson rode with a small company, crossing the green fields of Carnarthon and the ancient ways that yet remembered the passing of Earl the Young. He came as a captain among captains, clad in mail worn bright by use. His horse was grey and tireless. At Edoras, he left his riders and journeyed on with few companions, for he would speak to the king of the reunited realm in council unmarked by ceremony. The coming of the King of the Mark was not taken lightly. Though he sought no splendour and called for no heralds, the honour long held between the Rohirrim and Gondor could not wholly hide his presence. When he passed through the gates of the White City, the guards straightened and captains took notice, recognising him by bearing and the scars upon his mail. No trumpets sounded, nor banners raised, yet word travelled quietly among the watch, and those who understood such things knew that a king does not ride so far in plain harness without cause. When he dismissed most of his riders to seek immediate counsel with King Arvalon, it was taken as a sign that the hour was grave. Thus his arrival bore the weight of great respect over ceremony, honour and silence. Thus the two kings met in a high chamber overlooking the White City, where the wind from Mindolluin stirred the banners of Gondor. Long they spoke of horses and harvests, of borders kept and roads watched, and of the temper of their peoples in these latter days. Only when such matters were set aside did silence fall between them, and Eardric's hand came to rest upon the pommel of his sword. "The East is restless," he said at length. "My riders have seen fires where none should burn, and heard old tales sung again among the hill tribes, songs that have not been raised in generations. These are no common bandits. There is order in their movements and purpose, though none among them can name its source." Arvalon Erendur answered not at once. He stood by the window and looked out toward the far horizon, where the land fell away into distance and haze. "I have felt such stirrings," he said quietly, "as the return of a grief long set aside. Something is waking that does not belong to this age. I feel that it moves without haste." Eardric regarded him gravely. "Then the mark will stand as it has always stood," he said. "If darkness gathers, it will find our bright spears set against it, our hearts unbowed. Still, I would know this from you if you're willing to speak it. Do you believe these signs are born of chance, or is this some will that endures?" Arvalon turned, and the light caught the hilt of Anduril at his side. "I believe," he said, "that what troubles us has learned patience beyond the measure of mortal designs. It does not press its claim, nor does it declare itself openly. That, more than strength of arms, gives me pause." Eardric remained standing, his gaze still focused upon Arvalon. "Already I have set more riders upon the eastern borders," he said. "Quietly, with no banner unfurled, with men who know the land and listen more than they speak. The old tracks are watched again, and the green valleys where none have passed in years are no longer left unmarked. We remember how swiftly neglect may turn to peril." Arvalon lifted his head. "Such measures are wise," he said. "Vigilance kept without proclamation is the surest guard of peace, my friend. Yet should the warning grow clearer, we must be ready to cast aside silence and gather strength without delay." "In this, I value your sight," Eardric answered plainly. "Many see what only stands before them. You have gifts that are strange to most, and see further, and it does not hasten your hand. Among my marshals, some would strike at mere rumour. I will stay their hand. A spear lifted too soon may miss its mark, leaving the arm that bears it weary when the true blow falls. But if the hour comes in truth, the mark will not linger. We will ride at once, with every banner raised." The King of the West regarded him with quiet approval, and a gentle smile passed across his face. "Then we are of one mind. We must meet this patience with our own. Let those who would stir fear find no answer yet. Still, we shall prepare quietly, storing grain, mending arms, and calling old oaths to memory, so that readiness may lie beneath the calm." Arvalon continued. Messengers of my house will ride the old roads again, and the north will be mindful of what stirs beyond its sight. No horn shall sound unless need drives it, but we will be ready. If the need proves greater than rumour, the beacons shall be lit, and every realm shall be summoned. For a moment, neither spoke. Banners stirred outside the hall, and the city lay bright beneath the mountain, untroubled and unaware. At last it was Eadric who drew a slow breath. Then I will return to my people, he said. They will see no change in their fields or feasts. The watch will deepen. If the world turns, we will feel it first in the still places, and when certainty comes, we will muster in full strength, as in the days of our forefathers. Arvalon stepped forward. And when it does, he said, you will not stand alone. The King of the Mark set his hand upon his heart. That is strength enough for the road. They parted in quiet accord. No trumpets sounded, and no heralds marked the hour, though both knew that the temper of the world had shifted. Long they had spoken of patience, but patience now bore the weight of preparation. Before dawn's first light, Eadric rode from the White City with his company. Few marked his going, but Arvalon stood upon the high walls and watched him pass into the grey. And like ice at the turn of winter, they felt the long peace was thinning. The days of quiet counsel were drawing to an end. Portents in the night. In a night of troubled sleep, King Arvalon beheld a vision. He saw the east darkened beneath a mantle of red. A great host bowed before a scarlet-robed figure upon a high place. A light arose from the west, cold and terrible, and he felt its gaze fall upon him with a weight that pierced beyond fear. The light shone over the host that lay prostrate before the robed figure, crying in unison in some blackened tongue of corruption. The figure on the eastern height never spoke, but even in sleep, the king could feel his power like a wave upon the coast. The host bore many banners, gathered from lands long divided or forgotten, drawn together by fear and promise. The robed figure bore a mask reflecting no face, and the absence of any countenance troubled the king. Then the dream deepened. It grew fouler. He beheld altars raised amid broken courts, their stones blackened and slick with fresh blood. Fires guttered in pits, while shadows capered about them, and cries rose from beneath the earth as though the very ground were being painfully torn open. Shapeless beings crawled through smoke and ash. Men maddened by whispers of dominion bound their own kin and cast them down in sacrifice. Towers burned and fell in showers of sparks. Rivers ran red in torchlight, and laughter answered the screams like the baying of beasts. The air itself seemed choked with soot, and the king, even in sleep, could smell char and iron upon the wind. These horrors passed before him without mercy, and he knew that what stirred fed upon despair and blood. The vision widened still, and Arvalon beheld the lands of Middle-earth, the east stirring, the south uneasy, the west firm and unaware. The immeasurable cold light from the west swept over everything. It was nameless, but its authority was felt. It endured in judgment, and spoke no word of command. When the king awoke, the weight of the dream had not departed. He knew that these visions were no phantoms born of unrest. Foresight had been granted beyond his will, and though fear attended them, he sensed no malice in the power that showed them. It was the stern weight of necessity. Long he sat in silent thought before the dawn, and when at last the sun rose over Mindolluin, he resolved that it was time to prepare his realm, and Middle-earth, for the long mustering of all who remained faithful. This was part 2 of my own written version of the Dagor Dagorath, the Last Tale of Arda. As always, no AI or similar tools were used to create this or any other chapter. I want to thank those who continue to support my work on the Red Book, especially those of the Lore Master tiers on YouTube and Patreon. Patricia, David, Victus, Wavesailor, Master of Dungeons, Moses, NCV 93, Seraphim 38, Brandon and Lynn. Thank you again. Part 3 of this tale will detail the return of Melkor's greatest servant, as Sauron rises once again from the shadow of time.